So, good evening, everybody. It's me again, Paul Woodadge for WW2 TV, with part two of our talk with Alan King, the Sherman tank radio operator with the East Riding Yeomanry. So, for those, I hope you've all watched the first show because that took us through Alan joining the army, becoming a tanker, getting into Normandy, getting into various escapades with tanks, getting knocked out and lost, and took us up to Le Havre. But today we're going to take from there to the end of the war and possibly beyond the end of the war, because Alan was still in the army just after the war. We'll see how it goes. We'll just get talking. And so it remains me to introduce my guests. You know who it is. So first up is Alan King. Good evening, Alan. Welcome to the show again. And to help out in terms of Alan's exact movements of the regiment, we have Ben Mayne, historian and friend of World War II TV. So good evening, Ben.
Evening, Paul. Evening, Alan.
And just before we went live, Ben is working on Alan's memoirs and putting it all together and putting into context. So Ben's just here to check that I get it right. Basically, Alan knows what he's talking about. It's just he's here to keep me in line, really. So we got as far as I just said the introduction there to the Le Havre and the liberation of Le Havre. So after then, Alan, you kind of had a tricky bit when you went ill, didn't you? So let's start with you being ill, and then we'll see where the conversation goes. So tell us about how you got unwell.
Well, when Le Havre fell, and we took the loot, split it up. We were then withdrawn a few miles, and for rest and recreation. And I think I was playing football. I suddenly had an awful pain in my stomach, and I fell down. I was put in a truck and rushed down to Rouen Hospital. They put me straight into bed. I had a special diet. They said I'd got food poisoning. So I suppose I had. Anyway, I was in bed there for several days, and then I was getting better. I was sitting in a chair beside the bed, and two officers from the Coldstream Guards appeared on the ward, and they said that they'd brought a tank convoy up from Avranches, and there was no crews, and they were going to crew the tanks as they progressed up towards what became known as Market Garden. And we had to line up outside. You had a medical examination. You were warm. You were breathing. You would do. Well, as operators, gunners, drivers all split up, and you four into that tank, you four into that tank, you five into that tank, and away we came. You couldn't believe it. We'd never even met each other before. And so we got clambered on the Diamond Tees, and it took us 2 days to get up to towards Nijmegen. We got to Nijmegen and stopped, and the whole valley was flooded, and there was one single little track road which disappeared amongst the floods. There were tanks on it, but we joined them. I think we did. At one tank wide, if you moved off that road, you sunk. But the Canadian troops had fold and canvas wooden boots, which they managed to edge past, and they did get over the bridge, and they did manage to get some of the men back from what's it called? What's the next? Nijmegen.
Arnhem.
Arnhem. Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Bit of a blank there. They
No
managed to get men from Arnhem back, but we never did, and we weren't going to go anywhere over that bridge. I think what had happened was that the 9th and 10th Panzer had escaped from the ring that they put round it, Falaise Gap.
Yep.
And it had gone north, and they were waiting for us. And so we crawled slowly backwards off this single road and gave up any idea of it all. They said it could have been a marvellous victory. I can't say where it could have been. Tank crews had not even met each other before. So anyway, we went back down the road to Sertogenbosch. And there were one or two East Riding Yeomanry men mixed up amongst this lot. We said, well, there's our road markings, signs on the side of the road. Said East Riding Yeomanry, we'll go back. So we went back and reported back. And they're in the office. I said, where the hell have you lot been? You've vanished for a fortnight or so and come back dragging a rifle.
Wow.
So anyway.
So let's just recap for a second, because let's make sure everyone's up to speed. So you were in the East Riding Yeomanry in France, in Le Havre. Yeah. Suddenly you're thrust into the tank with the guards, and you're involved in the Operation Market Garden. So I mean, Ben, we'll go to Ben. How common was that for just to bring in crews when you need them? I mean, is this common at this point in the war? I've never really heard of it before.
No, I'll be honest and say I until Alan had told me, I wasn't really aware of it. But I can appreciate that if they needed the men to staff and crew the tanks at times of important need, for Operation Market Garden being the prime example, I can understand them using the resources that they've got to help with that push. And as we know, the 1st Airborne Division at Arnhem were in need of that support and the push to try and get up the road to them. So, Alan being utilised and moving across where he was needed at that time, but then only for a short period, 2 weeks, as he says, before he then heads back down the road to Hertogenbosch and links back up with the East Riding Yeomanry.
Right, so we're up to speed with that. And I do remember there was a draft of RAF regiment guys into the infantry with the Guards for Market Garden. So they obviously were in need. I think it was the Irish Guards ended up, it might have been the Scots Guards ended up with some RAF regiment guys, but that was for the infantry protection. But anyway, I digress. So Alan, you're back now with the East Riding Yeomanry. So you've had your brief escapade with the Guards. What's next?
Well, they were still the crew of the tank, which I was attached to, was they did have a wireless operator, but as soon as they see me appear, they got rid of him, and I got back into the old crew again. And Major Sherman, who was a Belgian, I think was actually he was going to be a priest at the outbreak of war, and he was commanding the B squadron at that time. And you never knew whether you're going to get a bollocking or a big blessing of him. He could speak 6 languages. We fought our way into these streets in Sertogenbosch, and during that period, there was a little family came up the other side of the road. A man, heavily pregnant wife, 2 little girls and a boy. And he was just shouting at them. There were shells bursting everywhere. Some of the debris from one of the roofs slid off the roof and blocked the pram. They had to abandon that pram, and he was still shouting. And they came across the road to where we were, and the lady, I mean, she was lagging behind the others. I mean, what do you do if you're a father of 2 little girls? Who do you save? He couldn't save them all. So all of a sudden, another radio operator was yelling to me, giving me my call sign, which is "Too Able." Halt, Too Able, halt, halt. The woman is on the ground behind you, halt. And I shouted on the intercom, driver halt, and the driver halted. There were 2 Welshmen. I think they were from an AK gun, or at least one of them was, because I did meet him. And they got a door from somewhere, and they plonked her on it and run off. And then the others disappeared, and that is the last I saw of them for a good many years.
Well, let's hold the story there for a second, because I want to bring Ben in to give a bit of historical context again. So this is so that brilliant stuff, by the way. And so Ben, which operation are we talking about now? And we've got a couple of photos we can share in a minute, haven't we? So
yeah.
So what's this part, the greater part of?
So this is named Operation Pheasants. So the Allies have punched that hole up Hell's highway towards the to Arnhem bridge, but the either side was still obviously held by the Germans, and the towns, villages needed to be fought for and liberated. So that is where Operation Pheasant comes in. It's split into different parts. The first part, I'll just make sure I get it right, is called Colin. First phase is called Colin, and the photograph here we can see this is B Squadron of the East Riding Yeomanry, part of Alan's squadron, making their way across roughly the area of Weigel and Boxtel, which is just southeast of Sertogenbosch, where the second phase, Alan, is the objective to get into Hertogenbosch and liberate the city. And the account that Alan just spoke to us about with the family running in amongst the tanks at the height of battle is that part of the operation itself. So this is towards the end of October. The quite a famous photo, really. You can see the father with the two daughters, and if you look at the rear of the Sherman, the right-hand side, just below number 52, you can actually see the mother.
Oh, the mother behind, yeah, yeah.
You can see the bottom of either her skirt or coat just set back as they were trying to get through this square. I mean, the bigger photo looks as though they're going under or into a courtyard, but in fact, if you look to the left, you can see they're actually in a petrol station.
Yes, petrol station, yeah.
That it's sadly gone now, but the position you can still go to visit that area where this was. The families, as we just said, in the height of battle, looking for that safety and trying to get through amongst Sherman tanks fighting. Wow.
So back to Alan now, because you tantalizingly said that you didn't see that family for many years. So tell us how you did indeed meet that family many years on. Bring us up to date with the next part of the story.
I think there was an article in our local place, Eastern Daily Press, about it. If anybody knew anything about the picture, and I wrote back to the burgomaster and said, give him a few details what I did know, and I was invited to go over.
Wow. And we've got a photo here of you meet. So there's a photo of you meeting the Dutch lady there. So, I mean, I don't want to be kind of cheesy, but I mean, what was it like meeting someone like that, a civilian that you had met all those years before? I mean, it must have been a pretty incredible moment. What was flooding through your mind when you met up there?
If only this had been 40 years ago.
Okay, right. I wasn't expecting that response. Well done for blindsiding me there, Alan. Perfect. Yeah, no, I mean, it's an amazing moment. And, we talked about it in the first show. You've been lucky enough to have some amazing opportunities these last few years, returning to battlefields, and you've become a bit of a celebrity, been involved in the Normandy Memorial and all sorts of commemorations to do with D-Day and Normandy, the World War II. It must be very rewarding to be able to do all these things all these years later. I'm pleased you got to do that stuff. So Ben or Alan, tell us what was that lady's name and how what she done after the war?
Well, I always call her Twos, but I think that's a Christian name.
Right.
I can't pronounce some of these other words.
Yeah. And what do you know? What was her? What became of her after war? Did she?
Oh, she got married.
Yeah.
And I did meet her husband, But she had very bad luck. She had a deformed son
Oh dear.
who died fairly early. And her daughter, and she had a daughter who has also died. She's all alone now.
Oh dear. Well, she got to meet you. That's some small comfort. But yeah, I mean, what an amazing story. And this is the kind of thing that we're kind of uniquely doing on World War II TV, is bringing you Alan's memoirs and also connecting it to some famous photos and some stories there. So it's wonderful stuff. So yeah. So I for fear of just repeating myself, what happened next, Alan? You've been involved in that liberation there. What's the next chapter?
The next chapter? Well, after that settled down there, we moved on to Benlow area. I mean, the weather was deteriorating fast, but then it was rain, and mud everywhere. And Monty House was wanting to get over the Rhine. Well, the infantry couldn't walk in it, and so they had these collapsible boots which they'd used in the Nijmegen area, and they opened them up, and they put a piece of rope from front of the boot to the back of the tank. We towed them along. People won't believe a tank towing a boot, but we did tow them through all that sloshy mud everywhere. Well, they done all sorts of repairs. They repaired bridges, and they done all sorts of things to help the army forward, but it was no good, not in that weather. And in the end, they called it off, and we turned to retreat, and a German shell took the side out of the ready tank. We bailed out that one in a hurry, and we were picked up by was it Repair and Recovery Unit, and taken to a place called Rosendal, which is quite away from there. And they thought that the war for the winter was over. Although the regiment was in Eindhoven, we weren't. We were at Rosendal. We had all sorts of little things happen to us out there. We were given 4 tanks to repair. There was enough East Riding Yeomanry men to crew 4 tanks. There was what they called a battlefield doodlebug, right, which wasn't as big as what they're firing at Britain. And they said it had a magnetic attraction or something or other in the front of it, and that would choose its own target. They could hit something like a railway train or a bridge or a tank, and which is a forerunner of what they've got today, I suppose.
Wow. So let's just recap again. You say you lost the side of a tank there. So not that we're keeping any kind of running total, but how many tanks have you now had shot out from underneath you since D-Day? It's 5. Yes. So you're either really, really lucky or really, really unlucky, aren't you? I mean, the fact you're still here is, I guess you are really, really lucky. But yeah, 5 tanks. I mean, that we did it in the first show. We talked about the comparative strengths of Allied against German armor and what have you. But going all that way as a member of a tank crew in a Sherman, all the way the multiple campaigns, you're kind of fighting the odds all the time, aren't you? So yeah.
Tommy Cooker, you are.
Tommy Cooker, yeah. So amazing stuff. So again, I'm going to put it. So what next? I mean, you talked about the another tank being that's number 5 now. So what's your next memory?
Convent. Well, we got to Rosendal.
Yeah.
And they put us in a convent. And that was an outdoor shed, not inside, unfortunately. A shed outside, full of straw, and we were absolutely exhausted. And so we did very little, only sleep. Although we were supposed to be working on those 4 tanks outside to get them ready for action, we did very, very little. We did as little as possible. A British soldier is very good at looking busy when he ain't doing anything.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah.
It's an art of in itself. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yes. So the senior members of the convent used to bring the young novices around every day, where they were looking very demurely with their hands clasped and sort of peeping and giggling. We kept whistling at them. So we had quite a time where we weren't doing anything at all. And that went on, I suppose, till early December. I've long lost any dates at all.
Mm-hmm.
And we was there one night, I think about 6 o'clock. We was in this buried into the straw, and we suddenly had such a roar at the door. Sergeant Major Parker explaining to us what he thought of us. That won't be repeat either, Ben. So, and we got to get those very 4 tanks on the road by dawn. And we had to work all night. I rigged up some lights, and we ammunition, greased, petrol, everything what had to be done was done. And the senior nuns, they stood crying all night.
Oh.
It was freezing like mad. And I was speaking to a Dutch lady, not many years ago. I was telling her about this. And she said, underneath all this strange clothing that they wear, there is still a mother. There's still a woman.
Mm.
They were crying for another woman's son.
Wow. Thanks for sharing. Wow. So so you've had to get these tanks ready in a hurry.
Yeah.
Where are you off to? Do you know where you're going at this point?
I hadn't got no idea, except the Germans had broken through in the Ardennes.
Right.
So when it got daylight, it was freezing. The temperature was going down and down and down, and we trundled off 4 tanks and 1-2 lorries with us. It took us 2 days to get from there down into the Ardennes, where being escorted by a military police. We got there in 2 days. Then we had to report, and they made us put the 4 tanks across the road as a barricade, and we had to stay in those things. As we mentioned before, they'd had an aircraft engine.
Yeah.
And that sucked all the air out from inside the tank and blew it out the back. They were absolutely freezing. There wasn't any tank commander NCOs there. The radio operators were operating in charge of them. So I used to take an old blanket and take my boots off and wrap them around my feet because I couldn't sleep.
Mm.
I was, yep.
Well, so I'm gonna bring Ben in again now for some historical context, because so Ben, we have this idea now all these years later that the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge, was an entirely American operation, or well, German offense, American event. But of course, the British were thrust in as well. And just for those watching in the USA particularly, and explain exactly how that happened, isn't it? Where did the British come up and join, and under whose command, and which units was it?
So the British do come down to the Ardennes. Monty kind of bigged it up as though they were coming in to win it for the Americans, which politically did cause quite a lot of embarrassment, especially between Churchill, Eisenhower, etc. So there was a lot of fallout from that in the end. Monty kind of having to apologise for his comments on effectively claiming to bail the Americans out, when in fact the British are coming down to probably just hold the line towards the rear.
Should plug a gap, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. And this was in the area of La Roche Ardennes, for anyone who hasn't been down there itself. But the East Riding Yeomanry, the 33rd Armoured Brigade, supporting the 51st Highland Division that moved down to that area. As well as that, because of the situation, you even have the British 6th Airborne Division coming in as well. So they're moving down to the southern part of that German thrust to try and break through to head up towards Antwerp, which we know fails. But the British coming in just behind the Americans, meeting up itself in La Roche Ardennes. There's a famous photo on the corner of the Highland Division shaking hands with the Americans when they meet up in I think late December or very early January. But they're moved in to support the Americans should it be needed. And as they've come in, Alan comes in from the town of Seney, probably about today 45-minute drive from La Roche Ardennes.
That's where the big military affair, isn't it? Seney, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Yeah. They bring the tanks in via the trains there, and no doubt Alan will add something in on what happens later on with the trains at Seney and the sidings. But they make their way across the countryside. Alan's account, he said to me before, the road was that thick with ice at points that they could get out, and a group of them could push the Sherman tanks across the roads because it was that thick. With ice. And again, you look through the war diaries and there are accounts of the tanks running off the roads because of the conditions and not being able to stick to...
Perhaps we should show that photo of the one of Houghton. I know it's not quite in the story yet, but it gives an idea of the conditions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it was, for those who are watching who aren't aware, that winter of 44, 45 was the coldest winter of the 20th century, wasn't it? So we had more snow, more ice, lower temperatures than we'd ever had before or since that century. And that photo doesn't quite do it justice. And that, well, we'll get on that town of Houghton later. That's the view you have behind you. You've got the modern view of that photo behind you, haven't you, Ben? So that's World War II, that's 1944, and then that's the same view behind you today. But I'm going to turn back to Alan now, because they're not here to listen to me or you, Ben, as much as we are slightly interesting. It's all about Alan. So the Battle of the Bulge, Alan. So there, Ben's talking about the ice and the cold and using blankets. I mean, just staying warm is of course a big priority. But what action did you get involved in there?
Well, I was still wearing the same uniform as I'd landed in. In the June, we were supposed to have tank suits. Yeah. But we noticed that all the, as we used to call them, the Royal Standbacks were well suited out, but the tank crews weren't. And I had a friend. Well, he was a bit notorious, but he didn't rob his comrades. And he said, "I'll get you a suit." And he actually broke in and got me one, but I didn't get that one. I got his dirty old one. Still, that was better than anything.
And that's the Pixie Suit, which is a wonderful bit of kit.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it's a big canvas and wool lined, and it's like a pair of overalls. It's got pockets for everything, and
marvelous.
Yeah, but you got it a bit late, and you got it only by someone stealing it. That's typical.
And another friend of mine gave me a pair of German jack boots, and they're the most warmest jack boot footwear that I've ever worn. They were leather, they were fur lined, and they were waterproof.
Well, interesting, because that came up. I sorry to interrupt you again, Alan, but that came up on Twitter with Gareth Davies, didn't it? A few weeks ago, Gareth showed a photo of what appeared to be British tank crews wearing jack boots. Do you remember that, Ben?
No, I didn't. I'm going to go and look for that.
It was a few weeks ago, and we were speculating about what was going on. I forget what the unit was. I think it was an RTR unit, but it looked like it was British tankers wearing either Wellington boots or jack boots. So Well, there's from the horse's mouth. There, it wasn't uncommon, or wasn't for British tankers to wear German jack boots. So I wish Gareth was watching. I mean, Gareth might be watching anyway. But yeah, we'll look back for that Twitter thread, because that was interesting. That was. But anyway, back to you, Alan. I just said I wasn't going to go on a tangent, and I did. So sorry for that. But so Alan, back to you. Sorry.
Back to me. Right. Well, an American officer came up to our colonel, and he said, I have got American reinforcements here with me. He said they have done 3 weeks training in the desert. He said we were in New York. He said just before Christmas. They belted across in one of the Queen liners. He said, and they put us into this. He said, I have got no idea what I'm going to do. I've got no idea at all. He said, they stand there shaking and shivering. And what finally happened was there was a huge glow in the sky. It was an American major, I think his name was Tom Parker, I'm not sure on this. And he suddenly realized what the Germans were heading for was their petrol depot. And he got some of his troops to put a defensive line across, and he ordered 2 officers to go and fire it. And it went up like a volcano, and you could see it 20 miles away.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Well, wow. Okay. Well, keep going on. This is all amazing stuff. I'm enjoying it.
Oh yeah. Well, as far as we were concerned, that finished. And so we got orders to go back to Brussels. We loaded up the tank train, B Squadron tanks, and they completely forgot to couple up the 2 coaches at the back with all the crews in, and the whistle blew and they steamed off into the far distance. How do you stop a railway train? I don't know. Nor did anyone else. So we didn't know where it had gone. Sergeant Major was hunting for billets for us. The poor people there had got no fuel at all for fires. And so, and he didn't know how to, he did know how to keep us warm. He formed us into tug-of-war parties, shunting. So for the best part of a week, we were shunting trucks around the goods yard in Seeney.
Wow. I mean, what I'm taking away from this is, from the first show and this show, is that we have this idea 76 years on of a very kind of efficient British Army, part of Allied forces moving its way towards Germany. And actually, there seems to be a lot of occasions where it's all a little bit woolly around the edges, and things are happening, with not a little bit less planning than we like to think of, and little mistakes being made, but yet somehow we do muddle our way through. But yeah, amazing stuff. So you spend a week doing tug of war,
Yeah.
to keep warm. What next?
Well, we used to fill a bag of coal up and take home with us back to the billets. So the civvies we billeted with, you got warm as well. And then they finally picked us up in trucks, and we went to Brussels. And the Sherman stood there on their tank train. Nobody got to get them off. But we got them off. But every morsel of food had been stolen at that tank. Nothing else, but they'd taken all the food. Well, they were who did it? I don't know. And then we thought, well, we're going to eat now. So we hunted around the goods yards and found an American supply wagon full of grub. Helped ourselves. And then the word came back, we got to go back down to the Mars, back where we come from, to learn to drive a buffalo.
Right.
We didn't even know what a buffalo was, really. And so off we went again. We went back to where we come from. And the number of men who had left, who had trained at Fritton Lake, was about 600.
Yep.
They were down to less and
Hang on a second, Alan. Your audio is cutting out a bit, Alan. I don't know what's going on with your microphone is cutting out a bit.
oh,
I don't know why. I haven't done anything.
Okay, try again.
okay.
Yeah, it's okay now. Yeah.
Yep. How far did I get?
You have been told to go and train to drive buffaloes, and
That's right.
and then
Yeah.
you mentioned Fritton Lake.
Yeah. I said at Fritton Lake, there's about 600 men from the regiment had learned to drive those things, but they were down to less than 200. So all sorts of weird people were taught to drive these here buffaloes, and the river was raging water in the river, very high, and you had to hit the bank at a certain angle to manage to clamber out of it. If you didn't, turn over. And the dance band that we had, there was 3 of them in one of them that did turn over, and they were drowned before they could get any tackle on it to haul it out. They were upside down, and all 3 of them were drowned.
Wow.
But I was driving one of them, and we let's say we learned how to do it properly. Like, so when the great day came, way back in the distant past, the Germans had been using infrared lights between an armored car and a Panther, and we had codged up something very similar, and the driver could switch it on, and the whole countryside was lit up with green light, and we managed quite well. I don't think we lost anybody else at all. We went back and forth about 6 times, and it was getting light, and then they decided that daylight was here, and they could then do away with it. We'd done enough. There was a commotion in the Buffalo. A friend of mine, Corporal North, it was Churchill and his gang, and they couldn't get anything big enough to get round Churchill for floats and things. But there was some Royal Naval personnel around, and they managed to, and he carried them across. And Churchill got out, and he wasn't going to walk up that bank with that lot tied on him. He had that off, and he went up and he marched along the bank, and he was the first one over.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to interrupt you for a second and let Ben bring in some historical context here again. So Alan's so good. There's so many things coming at me now, and Churchill and buffaloes and Trev. But just so where are we in the history of the East Riding Yeomanry at this moment, Ben? What's going on exactly?
So they come back from the Ardennes, and the Shermans are taken away from the East Riding Yeomanry. And that's at the 24th of January. They come back from Signy. They're then told to begin to prepare for Operation Varsity, the crossing of the Rhine. So they spend pretty much the next 6 weeks in conversion training for the buffaloes. That's a small troop transport vehicle the infantry can get in. For those who haven't seen them, it's on, I want to say it is on a Sherman chassis, but I'm not 100% sure thinking about it now, but very high sides on it. And it can then go into the water obstacle, the Rhine, and then power across, similar to like a DD would. And then get up the other side for the infantry, can then disembark, move on to their objectives. The buffalo would cross back across the Rhine, then pick up more, and was a ferry backwards and forwards. So 6 weeks on, Alan and the East Riding are preparing ready for this, and then on the 24th of March, they carry out that task, taking the I think it's the 51st Highland Division again, I think.
That's right.
Off the top of my head, again, they're still with them, taking them across to the eastern bank of the Rhine.
So just for those watching, just recap. We've got with us Alan King, who has taken part so far on D-Day, the Battle of Normandy, the liberation of Le Havre, Market Garden, Battle of the Bulge, and now the Crossing of the Rhine. I mean, it doesn't really get better than that. You've pretty much got the full set of Northwestern European battles, Alan, and we haven't quite finished your war yet. So, I mean, amazing stuff. And there's the comments on YouTube are people enjoying this, and it is a very rare opportunity these days in 2020 to listen to someone who was actually there. So we're enjoying it a lot and immensely, Alan. So you've spent 6 weeks buggering about, taking people across the Rhine in buffaloes. For fear of repeating myself, what's next?
Well, I think that the powers that be thought that the East Riding Yeomanry had done enough. And so we got sent north to a little Dutch town called Collapsible, or we call it Cat Shovel.
Right, yeah.
And that's where the war finished. People did ask me, did you have a big party? Well, those Dutch people were absolutely starving. They had no food. The RAF and the United States Air Force had been dropping food parcels for 6 weeks. They had absolutely nothing. But they had a few dancers and put a few flags out. And someone got a little ice cream parlor going. And so we celebrated with a dollop of ice cream in the bottom of our tin mug.
Do you remember what flavor it was?
Vanilla, I expect. I don't know.
Vanilla. So, but the thing is, I mean, VE Day has come around. Ben just an hour ago on Twitter sent me a photo that you and Joyce have kindly allowed us to share with the viewers today. So there's a photo of you in this village, which we'll share now. So this is, well, not just you, but that, and we'll expect. So that's VE Day, isn't it? That looks suspiciously like beer in that glass, not ice cream.
No, it wasn't beer.
No,
it was some concoction that they made out of potatoes.
Okay.
And he's got a kick of a mule.
Well, and that's you there, I'm guessing.
That's me. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I had some beer in them days.
When you're looking at that, 75 years on, of the war ending, what, you'd lost, one of your best mates back in Normandy. You'd seen tanks get shot up and lost and things. What was the biggest feeling? It wasn't celebration. It must have been more just relief. It was all over. Well, how were you feeling that day?
Well, I can't explain the feelings anyway. But it wasn't over.
No.
Because the guards armoured were in the vicinity and they rushed the Diamond T's down to pick them up, and they went north to Kiel or Lebu, I think it is. There's a great big submarine memorial there.
Yeah.
They rushed north because the Russians had made all these agreements what they were going to do and where they were going to stop, and they didn't obey any of them. They kept on coming. And the guards went north, and we had to wait till the Diamond T's came back. And then they loaded us up. We followed them up there. And there was staff cars with the Russian flag flying out the back. But our colonel wouldn't have none of that. But he got organised. And we put them a-going. But they never did go back to where the line that they said they were going to stop at. What all agreements have been back about. Wow.
I mean, it's hard to know what to say. But you've now battled the Germans, and now you've got problems with the Russians. So and as we'll find out, because you've got more to go, your story doesn't end yet. But Ben, what do you think was happening with at this point with the Russians, and this is that kind of slightly confusing period of the jostling for positions in post-war Europe, I guess, yeah?
Yeah, the task that the East Riding get given once they move up to Lebu, and then they spend a lot of time in the small town of Lebu, where for those who have been, you've got the naval memorial, I think built in 36, huge tower, 100-foot high that overlooks the area. But there were German vessels still there in the port area, and munitions as well, torpedoes that needed to be secured and protected as well. But as for the Soviets and what they were doing, I'll be honest, I haven't looked into that side of the story, why they were pushing up towards that area. But yeah, I guess they were just trying to push forward, gain as much land as they could, knowing that it was going to come to a standoff against the Western Allies and a new phase, the Cold War.
Yeah,
that were trying to push and get as much land as they possibly could.
Yeah, it could be, and just that possibly because of its keel, just trying to get naval intelligence or something, or gadgetry or something they wanted for the Russian war. If I don't know, but the next phase, and something you particularly wanted to talk about in this show, Alan, was the poor victims of the war after war, because you were still there in the next phase where, and for those watching, that we have this idea that the war ends and it's all very neat and very concluded, but of course it wasn't. Europe is awash with tens of thousands of refugees and displaced personnel, and there's people who've moved, the German prisons of Russia and Russian prisons of Germany, and there's a whole lot of confusion over the next few months and indeed years. So what happens next for you then, Alan?
Well, that summer of 45 was fairly quiet, and the regiment was broken up, I think, in the spring of 46, and I was put on with some others on board a lorry, and we were going to join the County of London Yeomanry, which was down in the Ham area of Germany, great big marshalling yards down there. And I went down there, got taken off that lorry, put on another one, and finished up in a concentration camp, which is full of Hungarian soldiers. There were searchlights, machine guns, the whole caboodle. And we had to man these things. And but the war was over. We couldn't understand it. The war was over for a year. And I don't suppose the Hungarians ever wanted to fight with the Germans anyway. But they all disappeared. They were bundled onto these blasted prisoner of war trains. They were probably the same ones that carted the Jews around. And they vanished. And then some of the others were sent to a camp which full of men, women, and children, all displaced people from the eastern countries, Lithuania, Estonia, and the other one. And they built all the defences for Germany in the Seine and on Guernsey and Jersey. And they all began to repair on these blasted trains. They were all sent to the east. Well, they had no hope of sending into Russian area because they were going to kill a lot of them, and they said so. And they did.
I mean, staggering stuff. And, it's, for those watching, it's not often that you meet veterans who have been in the kind of 1944 battles and are still around in the 45, because as Ben would know and the historians, the army is kind of replacing itself. You get the units that are there in occupation duty, British and American army. They're often the guys who've just come in the last few weeks. The veterans have either been killed or wounded, or they've been discharged and gone back home. So to have that continuity of someone who was in the sharp end of the fighting, but also in the aftermath immediately after World War II, when you're speaking to Alan Bennett, you're getting there's a rich text of experiences you're tapping into there. And we talked about it in the first show, but Alan is he'll blush now, but I mean he's a national treasure, isn't he? I mean to be able to tap into that kind of resource and all those different complicated things is extraordinary, isn't it? So I mean, it's just, you don't know how to carry on, stop these programs because the memories are so there. But Alan, I mean, how is, when you think about that those poor victims of the war, did the victory seem somehow more strange to you? We were fighting for some principle and now there's these poor victims, and it must have left you with some very complicated thoughts.
Well, I think you have to ask my family about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tragic stuff, really.
Yeah. I wouldn't talk about it for 40 years.
Yeah. And please don't say anything you don't want to say. I mean, it's entirely up to you. We're here to hear your wisdom, but not make you to feel uncomfortable at all, Alan. But I mean, it's you've been through a lot, and we are honored that you are here talking to us. So, you know, I mean, it's amazing stuff. So let's how did you finally get out of the army?
How did I finally get out? Oh, I went from County London Yeomanry to the Royal Scotch Greys.
Okay. Moving up in the world. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And had a march behind those blasted bleated bagpipes.
All right.
Oh dear. Couldn't stick that row. Yeah. Well, anyway, when they had promises, you know, demob according to the service you'd done and how old you were. But Navy stepped in and said, we don't want all these massive, great crews of battleships and never use them again. And so they took a lot of the places up. The RAF were dumping a lot of their stuff, people. And so it just went on and on. I'd done another 2 years.
Right.
And when it comes to my turn, eventually, I went to York. And people have said to me, and this only happened last week. Of course, you got a lot of money when you came out. I'm damned if I did. A soldier's pay had got by then just got up to £1, 1 shilling a week.
Mm.
So I got £3, 3 shillings, and say goodbye.
But you probably got a demob suit. Probably didn't fit you, but you probably got a suit.
Well, they didn't fit, no.
No, I don't think they were meant to fit, were they? I think I
don't believe they were.
No, they gave the short guys the big ones and the big guys the tight-fitting ones. That's how it was. But you know, so when you come on these shows and you talk to people like me and you talk to Ben, you know, is it, you know, we touched on this in the first show. Does it help you going through them? Is it cathartic experience talking about it? Is it, you know, you said you didn't talk about it for 40 years. Is it easier now than it was to talk about it?
Yes, I think it's easier. There's certain times when I sort of give, but
I think it's important, isn't it? I think we all have to be emotional sometimes. I mean, it's this horrible COVID year we've had. You know, I think we'd all be lying if we said we hadn't had moments this year where it's all felt a bit too much and we're a bit overwhelmed by things. I've had some moments where I felt, you know, what's it all about? What's it all for? And, you know, shed a few tears here and there. I think it's important, you know, to go through that. So, you know, but Ben, you know, as we bring it to you again, I mean, I don't want to, you know, a national treasure. I mean, it's this extraordinary reminiscences there. Right? I mean, and we were saying before going live, you know, you are putting Alan's memoirs together, but you're not having to add much because Alan is so good and everything is so detailed. You're just there to just kind of make a bit of order out of it, really, as we're doing tonight. You know, Alan can talk. We're just adding a bit of structure. That's all, isn't it?
Yeah, 7 years ago when we first met in Normandy, and we got chatting, and Alan and his family have been very kind and offered me the chance to come across not long after to talk more away from the commemorative period in Normandy, so it was a more relaxed environment. And Alan gave me these incredible accounts and I was just captured by it. So as we do, I went to the National Archives, I get the war diaries, and I read through, and I'm just reeling through parts that Alan has recounted to me. And then I'll never forget going back across with the diaries to see Alan, and he looked at me and he just said, I told you I wasn't lying. And it's been to document it. It's been really, really good because Alan's accounts have just matched in times, dates, places, locations of villages, the photos that he's provided as well. We've been able to narrow places down to the photos. Yeah, and from me, it's thank you to Alan and his family for allowing me to get to know them all as well. It's been
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Alan's family. I mean, it's again, from my point of view, like you, Ben, I've spoken to many veterans, and those that have had the long careers, and it in the grand scheme of things, a year and a half doesn't sound, a couple of years doesn't sound very long, but when you're fighting all the time, it's a long, long time. You find that sometimes their memories are better of the more recent parts of the war, but their memories of perhaps the earlier part. Alan, bang, bang, everything really good. I mean, amazing. Is there any stories, just because we'll bring it back to you, anything that you haven't said, any funny stories, anything that we haven't covered already, anything, any former commanding officers you want to have a go at now, or for any former tankers who owe you any cash who might be watching, anything you want to bring up?
Oh, well, there's one little tale before I ever went to France. We were training in England, and one night everybody woke up coughing, spluttering. Oh, couldn't breathe. What else happened? The whole hut was full of smoke, the whole Nissen hut. So we had, my friend Corporal Wilkes, who unfortunately I had to bury, and Corporal North. They said, them buggers next door, he said, have put a sack over the chimney. They weren't going to let him get away with that one. So after we'd blown all the fumes out of our hut, they took a bucket off the fire rail. I said, come on, you lot, fill it up. So eventually it got fairly well full. And a few nights later, they got hold of one of the smallest blokes, that wasn't me this time, and plonked him up on the roof, and handed him the bucket. And he poured it down the chimney, chucked the sack over it, and we stood outside waiting, what's going to happen. They came out there like a swarm of angry bees.
I don't think we need to explain what was in the bucket. I think most people have guessed what's in the bucket. So, I think we've got that. I mean, I'm just great. I'm monitoring what's happening on YouTube, the questions we're getting, Alan, and we have had the question, what did you think of the German tanks? Did you ever get a chance to look at a Panzer IV or a Panther up close? And what did you think of the German armored vehicles?
The Germans? The only one I ever actually went into was a Mark IV.
Right.
We had a officer, a Lieutenant Jennings, and I don't know, he was leading a patrol or something like that, and he spotted it, and he weighed up the situation, and he had been an artillery officer, so he said to his wireless operator, right, take over and drive slowly down the road, because he'd spotted a anti-tank gun in the hedge. And he got to the gun, he loaded the gun. The Mark IV saw him go, and it gradually crawled out of its hiding, and he fired and he got it. Because I was asked this question about 2 years ago. Why didn't he get a medal? I said, no, he didn't. He got a bollocking. He deserted his post. He said, never left his tank.
Well, I think if everyone came out of the army with a list of their bollockings rather than their medals, it would be a long, long list. If my relative was anything to go by, I think a list of someone's bollockings would be twice as long as a list of your medals. I think, given that we're very stingy in the British Army with medals. Yeah. So I mean, so you did you get what happened when you looked at this Panzer IV? I mean, did you get a chance to look at it? You went inside it. So what did you think?
Yeah, it's the only one I have. What I thought of it was very, very well designed. A Sherman tank had got the breech right inside the turret.
Yeah.
Which was a hell of a mistake. The German gun was much forwarder than what the 75 Arnie Sherman was, and it got a sort of giant spring thing attached to the breech of the gun to the floor of the tank, and so they gave them an awful lot of room inside, which we never had. I thought it was well designed.
Mm.
Because they try to put they make all this fuss about our 17 pounder. The Tiger carried a big gun, 88.
Yep.
And I think the Panthers was a 76 high velocity.
Yep.
And there was they had plenty of room in their turrets. We didn't. I mean, I could hardly squeeze around. I wasn't very big in those days. I could hardly squeeze around to get the shells into the gun. So, what else can I say about it? But the Sherman, they tried to ram. You couldn't alter the shape of the Sherman turret at all. You couldn't alter it because of the design of the thing. Although you try to put a quarter into a pint pot.
Yeah.
They put 2 more cylinders on the mechanism to cut down the recoil, and then that was too great. And I think they had to remove part of the explosive behind the shell, so they might as well left it alone.
Yeah, we're getting some questions about how British tanks work in combat. I don't want to go too deep because we've been at it an hour now, but in general, Alan, because we talk about the use of tanks, and there's great books by people like John Buckley and others about the use of armor in Normandy. For you as a radio operator, do you feel you were well versed in what tank doctrine was about? Were you taught about moving like 4 forward, 3 in support? Or was it just kind of a free fall? Did you feel you really knew what you were doing genuinely? Did it get better as the war went on?
No. No.
I kind of knew you were going to say that. I kind of guessed that. I mean, and that's why I didn't want to kind of bog you down with questions that you perhaps don't, because when we talk about tank doctrine, we talk about the manuals being written by officers. I don't always think that information filters down to the people who actually need it. I mean, what kind of briefings were you given before going into combat? Let's take Normandy. Did you have any kind of tactical approach to these battles, or was it just a question of driving down the road and improvising?
Well, the officer did. He had a map board, and it was a pretty stiff one with a map below and coloured crayons to mark on. The radio operator didn't. So if the commander got injured or hurt, you were lost. You couldn't turn. The wireless operator could turn his visor around. The commander couldn't. The driver couldn't. And I don't believe the co-driver could either. I don't think he could. And we started off with a .5 Browning mounted on the top of the turret, which you were supposed to stand up bravely, head and shoulders stuck up in the sky, and fire. But I think my friend Corporal Wilkes was about the last one was killed, because every German patrol had got one man with his eyes focused on top of that turret. The slightest movement he saw, he fired. And a German Spandau could fire 1,000 rounds a minute. So he only got to give his trigger a little press. You got a swarm of bees are coming at you. One of them will hit.
I think this is Ben. There's 2 ways of looking at these type of things. There's looking at tank doctrine in terms of the organization of the British Army, and there's listening to someone like Alan who was there and did it for 2 years, and you realize there's a big disconnect between what the Allies were thinking we were doing and what actually the men at the sharp end were actually facing. And I think going down into a conversation now about the tactical use of East Riding Yeomanry is the wrong occasion to do that. I think we could do that in a future show. I think we just accept what Alan has said, and that's what matters. The experience of a guy who was there. That's what we're doing on this show. So I think we've been at it for an hour now. I think we could keep on talking, but we've come to a natural conclusion. I think it's been amazing. People are saying it's the best show ever done. You're a star, a true king. There's your head will burst with the praise. Joyce will show you all the comments later on when you play it back. But amazing stuff. So Ben, thank you very much for bringing Alan to me. Joyce, thank you for bringing Alan to me. Alan, thank you very much for being just absolutely amazing as usual. And you are welcome to come back and talk about whatever you want on World War II TV, whatever you want. Come and just bitch about commanders, bitch about tanks, talk about funny stories. You can just come on and whatever you want to do, you can come on and do it. It's you're welcome anytime. So thank you very much. In terms of for those watching, we've got a show tomorrow afternoon. Don't forget, folks, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We've got me. I'm interviewing the producer of the new Dutch film Forgotten Battle about the Scheldt Estuary, which hasn't come out yet. The film, in fact, the film's still in post-production. So I'll be talking about bringing a World War II battle to the silver screen. That'll be interesting. Then we've got shows on Sunday about Dieppe and the Castle Raid. So lots coming up. So I'm gonna finish with Alan have a final word for tonight, and then Ben maybe. But Alan, anything you want to say to the viewers of this? Any words of wisdom, nuggets of your experience?
Well, I'm afraid not. Most things have left me behind now.
Okay. Well, Ben, thank you very much for putting this together. It's been brilliant stuff. So on behalf of everybody watching World War II TV, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Alan. I'm going to end the show now. That's been amazing stuff. It's been brilliant. So I'll see you all soon on World War II TV. Thank you very much for watching, everybody.
Thank you.